Hello, welcome to the Backyard Machine Shop. Well guys, it's been 2.5 years since I built this Exmark, and I get questions every week about it, and I figured it was about time that I give you some updates and seen how it was doing. As far as the mower goes, the mower's been fine. I think I've been cutting grass. I cut grass November 2017 is when I put the deck back on, looking back at the videos. And since 2017, I see you figure 2018 and 2019 I cut grass through the summer. 2018 and 19 I cut probably, well, what you see here in my place is this front yard is about 3 acres, and then it's about 1.5 acres in the back. So that's 4.5. My mom's place, I cut it every week. That's another 5 acres. So that's 9.5 acres a week there. And then I was doing 2 lots last year. I haven't done them this year, but last year I was doing, the previous 2 years I was doing 2 lots that were, one lot was probably 3 acres and the other lot was acre and a half. So I was cutting about 14 acres a week with this thing for the past 2 seasons. This year I've probably cut 10 acres a week. I think this is about the 4th week of the 10 acres now. Have I had problems with this machine? Yes. I mean, as far as the motor itself has been fine. I've had problems with like carburetors. I think I'm on my 3rd carburetor. It's easier to buy a carburetor and put on it than to rebuild the one that's in there. All the things that you see that people post about smoking, carburetor issues, I haven't really had spark plug issues, but I have changed them out, so I wouldn't know if I have them. But pretty much if you get on the internet and look up this Predator 670 and the problems that people have, I've had them. Again, the carburetor's been the main thing. Fuel pump, that's about it. Really, the motor itself's been really strong, still is real strong. Also, when I fixed this motor, I rebuilt the hydraulic pumps. Hydraulic pumps have been awesome. They had no problems. A lot of people commented that they weren't going to work for long and blah blah blah. This thing is still staying straight up in the air, even with the deck on the front of it. And so hydraulic pumps have been awesome. Other than that, changing blades every 2 or 3 weeks, and keeping tires with air in them is really the only problems I've had, other than the carburetors. Now again, the carburetors have beat me up pretty good, and the fuel pump. I had to figure out a few things with the fuel pump. So what I'm going to do is I've cut my mom's grass the last couple of days. I think it was the day before yesterday, Monday. I usually try to cut on Monday, but I think I cut on Tuesday this week. And so I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna show you some video of it cutting grass. And I mean, it's just mowing, and there's some, I tell you what it really did do. It showed you how good these GoPro 7s, the stability control is, because I actually mounted the GoPro here on the deck right at my feet, and this thing about beats you to death cutting grass. And looking at the video, I've already watched some of it. The video is smooth as silk. So we'll show some of that, and hang with me. When you come back, I'm going to show you I'm going to answer some of the questions that people have for me every week about this machine. All right. first things that probably the most asked question that I get is about the charging system. Now, the charging system only puts out it's really low voltage or low amperage, and it does not maintain the battery with the clutch going. So what I've have to do, I actually have bought an alternator. I've just never built the bracket to mount the alternator. So I have an alternator, and you'll look on the motor. I'll show you that we already have a pulley installed. Actually, machined the pulley when I put the clutch on to run the alternator. So I have everything to put it on. I haven't put it on yet. Like I said, I cut 14 acres a week. I'll have to charge this battery in this machine. I charge it every week, but the last 2 weeks I haven't charged it just to see how long I can go. So I was able to cut 28 acres off a charge. So 20 acres off a charge. I only cut 20 acres in the past 2 weeks. So normally that's 2 weeks. I usually charge it every week. When I park it, I hook the battery cables up to it and just keep it maintained. But I can get 2 weeks out of it, which is about, I cut, what you see here, I cut my mom's place 5 acres. I'd cut it in an hour and a half. And this place takes me a little less than that. And so you figure you're getting 6 hours off a charge. So it's really no big deal, but to answer your question, the charging system with this electric clutch does not maintain the battery. So there you go. If you're going to choose to do this motor, you probably pretty much need to upgrade the charging system to do it. Now I'm going to walk you over and show you some of the stuff that I've done. So all right guys, so if you look back here, see if I can get it in there where you can see it. You see there's a pulley back there for an alternator. Now I'm going to make a bracket of some sort and mount off of the motor over probably on this side and end up mounting an alternator on it. So the charging system really and truly is not enough for this lawnmower. The motor, it keeps the motor running, that's about it. Guys, so the next question I get all the time is wiring. How was I able to wire this motor into this Exmark body, this chassis? Simple answer is I didn't. The motor is pretty much independent of the chassis. Only thing I had to do was run a hot wire to the starter, and I'll take you over and show you what I did. The chassis the wiring on the chassis I changed a little bit. Basically, I've wired up an electric fuel pump and the clutch to the ignition switch. So I have to turn the ignition switch on to energize the clutch and the fuel pump. So if it's not on, the motor won't run because it'll run out of fuel because it have the electronic fuel pump on it. So, and the simplest thing for me to do, and I'll show you, hold on. So, all right guys, so to start with, the electric fuel pumps down below this panel, and like I said, if you listen, you hear it come on. It's just one of those little square electric fuel pumps you can buy. All right, so it's pumping fuel right now. And what I had when I and I'm not going to take all this apart, but it was overriding the float. So what I did is I went in here and put a T in, and just ran me a return hose. And if you look, you can see it spraying fuel back into the tank there. Okay, so that's really and truly solved all the problems, with the exception of the carburetor plugging up on one side this year. All right, guys, so here's what we got for ignition. We have the choke. I just removed the, what I've done was I removed the control box off of the motor and came over and mounted it on a piece of angle and welded that angle to the chassis of the machine. Now, I can reach this from the operator's position, and it cranks. Now I did move the throttle to the front of the operator's position. That's the only thing that's not on here that was original to the controls for the motor. Third question I get is, how does it hold up? Well, I'll let you calculate that out. I cut grass every week from about middle of April to November, middle of October, November. So that's April, May, June, July, August, 6 months, 4 times a week. So I cut at least 10 acres those weeks. So talking about 250 acres over the course of a year, and I don't know, you can cut about 2 acres an hour, 3 acres an hour with this machine. So calculate that out, 3 acres times 240, 750 hours on it. So I've got probably 600 or 700 hours on this machine, at least, maybe a little more. If you want to do the math, you can do the math. Change the air filters every year, change the oil every year, change the fuel filter every year. So fill up the pumps, the oil in the pumps, they really don't leak. I did have a slight leak on one of the seals. I went in and replaced that seal. While I was in there, I did that beginning of this year. When I was into the pump, there was absolutely no wear. If you remember through the videos, and if you didn't watch them, go back and watch rebuilding the pumps. But they were worn out when I got them, and luckily this machine's probably 20, 30 years old. I can't remember if it's an 86 or 96 or 84 or 94, but it's up there. It's got some age on it. But go back and look, and that the pump rebuilds. But the pumps look immaculate inside, no problems whatsoever. The hydro motors on the wheels, they're original. I just flush them out whenever I do stuff like that, put them back together. I have never been in them, so I don't know what kind of condition, but again, this thing still is super strong. It will pull the wheels if you from a dead stop when you make the turn. So really the only thing that I have had the problems with was A, the carburetors, and B, keeping blades on it. I mean, I go through a set of blades every 2 or 3 weeks. So these yards, I don't know if you can tell, but this is a sandy yard. My mom's yard is sandy. The other 2 places I cut are real sandy. So it's just like sandblasting the blades every time you cut. And this thing will throw chips and swarf, I guess you'd call it. It'll throw it 10 feet out. So it's really moving some air in there. talked about the carburetor. So here's one of the carburetors that I took off this year and changed it. Now what happens is, and there's a couple of things with this one. Well, let's go back and talk about every issue I had with the carburetor. When I first put the motor together, I would go cut grass and it would run for a while, and then it would stop running. So I'd go through the carburetor, get online and read all the forums about all the problems with the carburetors, and that's what I did. Well, it wasn't a carburetor issue. What the issue was originally, actually I'd quit using the diaphragm pump on the motor, and I'd already put an electric fuel pump on. And so none of that solved the problem. So what initially my first problem was, and it was my fault, it wasn't the engine. But what the problem was, and I went ahead and changed the carburetor before I found the problem. So I've changed it 3 times. I've got a good carburetor, I guess, sitting in the shelf back there, and this is the one I've changed this year. But what the problem was, the right side fuel tank here, actually I'm sorry, the left side fuel tank was actually plugged. And what it would do is when you cut the fuel off, it would the blockage would release, and so I could cut grass for a little while, and then it would starve for fuel again. And so that was partially my fault. Left side or the right side tank, I use that only right now mainly, and I'll show you in a minute, because of the electric fuel pump. Well, anyway, this carb here, the way these carbs work, now here's a carb spacer and 2 gaskets, and it's a 2-barrel carburetor, but primarily it's running 1 cylinder off of each barrel. So I have a plug jet in this one, so when I started out this year I couldn't run but 1 cylinder, so I had to go through the process, and I've took the car apart, cleaned it, done everything, and I still could not get but 1 cylinder to run. So I just spent $50, put another carburetor on it. The Honda GX 670, I think is what it is, carburetors. They're like $50 in Chinese carburetors. So that's what I did, and it's running great. What I'm thinking about doing, though, the next time I have to take the carburetor off, is either switching to a single barrel and making an adapter to a manifold to run a single barrel on this engine, or either modify these gaskets in this spacer so that when it goes on, you have it's kind of like a open plenum intake manifold. You'll have a space in between that will allow the fuel to mix from both sides and balance out the motor. I think that's the way this motor should run anyway, but I'm not an engineer, and this is the way they designed it, and I've been keeping it that way. So these are the carbs. I mean, they're just simple carburetors, simple engine, but they have kicked my butt for 2 years on this thing. If it weren't for that, I would say this has been one of the sweetest things I've done. Next thing, clutch. I did go through 2 clutches. I went through 1 clutch the first day, a brand new clutch the first day I put this mower cutting grass. And come to find out, you have to read instructions very carefully when installing these clutches. They have to be spaced a certain amount. And if you remember, I showed you the pulley for the alternator, and that's what that spacer is. The way that clutch works inside, it's got to have clearance on one side, or if not, you'll destroy it. Believe me, I did it one day. So got all that straightened out, haven't had no problems with the clutch ever since. All right, guys, so $100 question, or $1,700 question. Would I do this again? And look, I can't afford $12,000–$15,000 for a new lawnmower, and I just not going to do that. So I have to do things the cheap way, just like my machinery I buy and restore. I do that because I can't go out and invest 100 grand for a couple machines to do work in my backyard. So and it's the same way with everything I have. I can't, you can go out and finance these things 0 interest for 10 years probably, but still 15 grand, 12 to 15 grand for one of these mowers, and they're worth it. Don't get me wrong. If I was cutting grass for a living and I could cut 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, yeah, it's worth it. You can pay it off and you get your money out of it. But for somebody like me that cuts, I cut my grass, cut my mom's grass. I got paid to cut those other 4 acres or so that I cut every week, but it wasn't enough to pay for a lawnmower like this. So no, I can't go out and buy a brand new lawnmower. So the only way I can have a lawnmower of this quality is to buy one and fix it, or either buy a used one. And if you buy a used one, there's a reason that somebody's selling it, because they probably either can't afford the payments, or they've got their money out of it. So I'm always going to be stuck with something like this. Now the question was, would I put the Honda or the Harbor Freight 670 back on it? And quite honestly, I don't think I would. I think I would go ahead and invest money up front for a quality engine. I mean, believe me, I hadn't had a minute's problem out of the motor. It's just been the carburetor issues, and you may have the same problems with the other motors. I don't know, but I think I would go ahead and try, either at least buy, now that I've got it set up for the Honda, I would probably go buy a Honda. I think the Hondas are around $1,200, so they're $400 more than what this one is, and they're probably a lot better quality. So there it is. That's what I would do. And if somebody asked me to recommend what to do, I would suggest buying a Honda if you want to set it up. If you don't want to set it up, buy a Kohler. But if you want to do this, it's not that bad. A few machine parts and it's done. So hope that answers everybody's question about that. So today, guys, what I've been doing is if you look out, there's a bunch of stumps. I've cut a bunch of trees down over the last couple of years, and I've been burning the stumps out. So what I did was I pushed around a can of diesel and a propane torch, and that's how I ignited the fires, and we've been burning. So what I'm gonna do now is these oaks, if you look, they drop the canopy down, and every year I have to come in here and trim these up. So